You're listening to the Family Discipleship Podcast, a podcast of Training the Church.
Hey, this is Adam Griffin, and I'm here with my two fantastic co-hosts, Mrs. Cassie Bryant and my wife, Mrs. Chelsea Griffin. Cassie.
Hi.
Do you have a favorite classic fairy tale or fable?
Oh, my goodness. I mean,
like Three Little Pigs. Thinking like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. A lot of threes, Three Little Mice.
I do love Goldilocks because just the idea of contentment, right? And I don't know.
There's a just right out there if you could find it.
Yeah, but I think that's and I guess she does find it, quote unquote, but not really because she's stealing it. So, no, I mean,
really calling out
I
Goldilocks.
love stories. I'm trying to think fairy tale. Does George MacDonald count? We love
what's that?
The Light Princess. George MacDonald, he was C.S. Lewis's favorite author.
Oh, convicted.
He writes a lot of
Cassie
fiction.
always talks to us like we were classically educated.
Well, you love C.S. Lewis, right? I thought maybe.
Yeah, I like C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, Adam does.
Yeah. I just apparently haven't read what he read, except for the Bible. But yeah.
Which is great. Not a fairy tale or fable.
Also, true story. Chelsea, favorite fairy tale, favorite fable, myth, legend?
I don't really like stories like that.
You don't like stories at all?
Well, you know, I get like
she said like
during movies and like I can never remember what movies are about.
Yeah. How about a favorite sports movie of all time? Sports story.
Let's see here. What's a really good sports movie? I think probably Happy Gilmore.
Happy Gilmore.
He had to save his grandma's house. He's
classic
a hero.
true story of becoming a professional
hero.
golfer to save your grandma's house from going into foreclosure. Classic.
That's important.
It is important. I thought you were going to say like Remember the Titans or something like Hoosiers. Gene Hackman passed away this week. Maybe Hoosiers would come up. But yeah. No. There we go. Happy Gilmore. Well, speaking of stories, speaking of the greatest stories of all time, like Happy Gilmore. Today's episode, I want to talk about the stories we tell ourselves. Cassie, what comes to mind when you hear that phrase? I was telling myself this story or a different story. What comes to mind for you when we say that?
Well, I think we live in a narrative, and typically we're the hero in our narrative. Like in our flesh, we think we're the big deal.
Yeah.
And so then that means that when we're offended or when, we're wronged, we walk in a lot of wrath instead of maybe forgiveness and mercy. But I think we're just constantly living in these stories, these narratives about people, about ourselves, about our families.
Right.
So, yeah. And sometimes the stories aren't true.
Right. You're exactly right. Yeah. When I was an English teacher, we taught on dramatic irony. Do you remember what dramatic irony is?
Yeah, I do.
Oh.
What is it, Chelsea?
It's when I was a good student, even though
I know you were.
Even though I didn't go to private school. Dramatic irony is when, like the audience knows something,
right?
But a character doesn't. So the character is going along, and you're watching, going, "Oh no!" Kind of like Missed Outfire situation. Like the nanny is actually Robin Williams,
right?
But the ex-wife doesn't know that.
That's good. The classic example is that Romeo doesn't know that Juliet is dead or is alive, but you do. He thinks she's dead. Right. So dramatic irony raises the kind of the tension in the story because you know something the character does not. And so Cassie, what you're explaining is kind of the opposite, right? We tell ourselves a story where because we know why we did something or because we know why something is happening, we have written a story in our heads about what is actually happening around us. But maybe we don't have the full story. Maybe we've made some assumptions about what the other person is doing. Talk to me about, Chelsea, when that comes up in marriage. What does that have to do with marriage? This season, we're doing a whole season on marriage. Is there ever a propensity in a marriage for somebody to tell themselves a story in which maybe they're the hero, maybe they're vindicated, maybe they're innocent, but maybe it's a story they're telling themselves, but it may be built on some assumptions?
This is like the essence of marital conflict in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh.
It's the opposite of what you and I talk about with couples a lot is giving each other the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Always assuming the best. So, I am really inclined to take something personally, not just with my husband, with anybody. Somebody says something or does something, and I'm thinking it's personal and it's at me. So even if someone could be having their own sad day, hard day, but if they look glum or, I don't know, just out of it, to me, it's like they want me to go away. they don't want to talk to me, or they're
You put yourself
annoyed by. I'm at the center of whatever's going on with them. Like
Right.
all of their actions are related to me.
Good.
When they may be unrelated. But yeah, this is so common in marriage.
Yeah. Any examples in our own marriage where you tell yourself a story or I tell myself a story that's come up again and again?
I mean, I can think of how this plays out in every little thing. You know, whether if your spouse plans something and it's not what you wanted, you know, then it's like, well, they were selfish or they were out to get me. And if
they never get it right.
Yeah, or they don't plan something and they left it up to you and you think, ugh, you didn't care enough to make a plan. And they may be thinking, no, I wanted it to be whatever you wanted, so I was waiting for you to choose. You know, this is just, this is the essence of.
Eric calls that so many ways to lose.
Yes.
So many ways to lose and very few ways to win.
That's right.
When your spouse is living in that false narrative, it's like it doesn't matter what you do because the narrative is dominant. Then you're going to lose
right. When that's
even
the narrative,
if you have good intentions.
Yeah. When that's the narrative you believe, you collect evidence for it. Right.
Yeah.
Like a confirmation bias kind of thing. You will collect evidence to support your theory and it will always be supported. And a lot of times, you know, it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where you say, you know, no one wants to be around me, so you don't plan to be around people. And then when they're not around you, you're like, see, I knew it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that.
Cyclical.
You know, in church world, when people stop going to church and like, well, no one reached out to me to see if I had a need. So I just was convinced that nobody wanted me there. I was like, well, did you ever reach out to somebody and ask for help? Did you ever tell them that you were disappearing? Like maybe people assumed that you didn't want to be around them anymore. And that's why you removed yourself from the situation. And we certainly do that in marriage all the time. Cassie, can you think of any persistent false narratives that tend to repeat themselves in a marriage? Like a lot of these stories that we tell ourselves are the same story we tell ourselves over and over again, which are things like what, Cassie? What comes to mind for you?
They'll never change.
Yes.
As a false narrative. I think regret like false narratives often accompany regret. So if there's regret anywhere in your marriage, then there might be a false story that you're living out of that. I don't know, like I made a mistake, or, you know, we should not have moved here. And because we live here, or because we took this job. And so then that narrative, the whole thing the whole relationship becomes tainted by this choice that you regret making, rather than kind of living in trusting that God is sovereign over that choice. And that, you know, if you're married, then like God's will is for you to be married. You're married to that person. And so how can you then live like in that reality and seek to like rehearse and change kind of the narrative maybe that your default mode is or what your flesh is in. But I'll just say, so he will never change or she will never change would be one that I think of. Maybe just regret, where like if we hadn't done this, if we hadn't kind of that, what's that movie Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow, where it's kind of, it paints two realities. If she had not made the train or if she had made the train, what her two realities would play out. And so it's kind of like you live in this false story of like, if we had done this other thing, the grass would be greener. Yeah.
Chelsea, anything coming to mind for you?
A false narrative that I hear from women a lot is, I do everything. I do everything.
I feel that way sometimes.
He doesn't do anything.
Right.
And sometimes I'm like, oh, wow, is that true? Like,
no,
you say that?
True.
No, I just wonder. I'm like, there's no way that's true. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it is, but like, I can't imagine that. You know, when I think about the way things are divided in our marriage in terms of like tasks we perform to keep the home working, there's no way that, I mean, it would be really hard for one of us to do everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You do a lot, I do a lot. And a lot of the things you do, I can't do or don't know anything about. Like that time you bought that like soaker hose that's supposed to go in the like to create moisture at the foundation of the house. And I was just like, how on earth would someone know about something like that? It was like the most insane thing, you know? But like, I'm sure for you, it's just like a miracle that the kids have shoes that fit, right? But as they start to not fit, I go buy them new shoes, you know? And that's just never been something that we had like a meeting of the minds over, you know?
You ever seen that video, The Magic Coffee Table?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Have we talked about that before?
No.
Cassie, do you know about that?
No.
It's a silly video, but it's about this husband whose wife goes missing and the police are in the room and he's like, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think she might have sat on this coffee table. And they're like, what do you mean? And he says, I'll tell you what, every night I leave stuff on this coffee table. And when I come back in the morning, it's gone. And he said, and I have really tested the limits. Like I have left trash all over it. I have left junk. I've left my laundry. In the morning, it's gone. And I wonder if she sat on the coffee table because now the coffee table is not working. And the one officer's like, that's ridiculous. And the other one goes, no, I have the same coffee table. Like, it's the same thing in my house. But that picture of like, not even understanding what the other person is doing, and they're doing so much for you. Some of the false narratives that I think you've brought up a couple of them, but stories that start with you always, or stories that start with you never. Right there, you got to go, is that true? I mean, you often, I could accept you often do this, or this has been recurring, or this is a pattern for us. But narratives that go like, they never do this, or they always do that.
They never help with the kids. They never, help around the house.
Yeah.
Come on.
I've worked with a lot of couples on helping them know, like they'll say, my husband is very controlling. And I'll say, well, what do you mean by that? And it's like, well, when I want to do this, he doesn't want to do that, or he says we can't do that. I say, okay, well, maybe he's controlling. And there is such a thing as being too controlling. But how can he disagree with you without being controlling? Is there a way that in your marriage you could receive him saying, no, I don't want to do that? And this is men and women, without saying like, see, they're being too controlling. Or to say, is there a way that you can disagree without saying, see, he doesn't respect me. See, she doesn't respect me. Well, there's a difference between disrespect and disagreement. But I know in our generation, it's hard. So we tell ourselves a story of like, see, they don't respect my opinion. I was like, well, maybe they have a different one, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're disrespecting you. A couple other ones. You were doing blank, fill in the blank, on purpose. This is the story. Like where somebody does something, you take it as it's at you. You take it as it's offensive. You take it as it's an insult. And so maybe they even made a mistake. Maybe they didn't do everything they thought they were going to do. Or maybe they forgot something on the grocery list. Maybe they didn't do everything that you asked them to do that morning. And you go, well, see, you did this you don't listen to me. Well, maybe they had trouble remembering everything. Maybe they missed something, but it wasn't necessarily like, on purpose. The one that I've heard a lot, unfortunately, from people who are wanting to get divorced, wanting to justify divorce, or have had affairs, they'll tell themselves the story that says, we should have never been married, or we were never really in love, is the story they'll tell themselves. We were never really in love. And by that, often what they mean is, there were often doubts in my heart about whether or not our marriage was a good decision. There were often doubts about how I felt about you, or our marriage has been hard for a long time. Those are true stories, but they take that story and turn it into, see, we never should have gotten married, or see, I never really wanted it. We were never really in love. Maybe the people who told us not to get married, they were right. And so that's that story. And again, we can talk about divorce. We can talk about biblical grounds for divorce and all those things. I'm just trying to bring up lists of narratives that I've heard that erode union in a marriage.
Yeah.
They erode unity in a marriage. They erode things because you keep telling yourself this story. And like Chelsea said, confirmation bias, you're always looking for evidence. See, we don't get along. See, we don't like the same things. See, when I ask him to do something, he doesn't do everything. When I say this is what I want to do, she says no. She says, hey, make any decision you want, but then any decision I make, she nags me about it. And you go, see, we never should have gotten married. Oh, whoa. That is a story you're telling yourself that is not fair, and it is not justified often. It is often a false story. So let's take it a step backwards. Let's go to where these stories come from a little bit. Cassie, help us think about this. How does our personal history, like the story that we have lived, where we've been, maybe our family of origin, things like that, how do they shape the stories we tell ourselves? How does what you've been through shape what you're interpreting?
I mean, monumentally. I mean, your history is, it's how and a lot of ways, it's how you've shaped your own identity, and then how you operate within a lot of your relationships. Even if you don't want to operate in your relationships the way that you do, like, even if you can acknowledge and like on your best self-aware, walking in the spirit days, can say like, I don't want to assume the worst or keep people at arm's length. But, there's so much about our own childhoods, our own family of origin, that just shape the way that we relate in our flesh. And so I think it's constantly having to work against like some of those like reflexes or reactions, or kind of maybe even, I don't know, I wouldn't call it nature versus nurture, but to deny that my family of origin, that like growing up, that my parents divorced when I was 9, and to just say like that has no bearing on the way that I'm going to walk into my marriage would be so naive.
Right.
And it's not that it's not that my marriage, it's not chains that like bind me up, right? Because in Christ, those things I can, claim what is right and true and good. I mean, Jesus died for me to have a better marriage, right? Jesus died on the cross and resurrected for me to be restored to God the Father, but also so that I can walk in freedom from any of my past and any of the way that my past shapes me. But it does inform a lot of that and the way that we're still operating in this already, but not yet. And so our flesh is still in our, I don't know if that's making sense, but all that to say, I can speak personally. When I got engaged, I remember I sat down with both of my parents and I just said, will you help me understand your story, Mom, your story, Dad? I sat down with them individually and kind of what happened. And then help me understand why, like how your second marriages have been so different and why you stayed, And it was so good for me to have their perspectives and to hear the story come from them and not just my 9-year-old perspective. Because even if you ask my brother and I, the way we experienced our parents' divorces were so different because of our ages. But it was just really sweet to hear their sides of their stories and then to be prayerful about how I would be entering into this covenant with my husband and to declare, like in the name of Jesus, that, hey, their story doesn't have to be my story. And I don't have to I don't have to expect Eric to let me down because my dad made a mistake or because my mom made a mistake. I don't have to expect to be the same way. I mean, like we all make mistakes. We're all sinners. We all have broken parts of our stories. And so I didn't have to be beholden to those things. And so it's still, I had to fight for that. Even in the early years of our marriage, I kind of lived in this narrative of like, I'm the one from a broken family, so I'll probably be the one that breaks us because Eric's family is a a little bit more shiny on the outside, So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, I've seen.
Yeah.
I know. I just want to remind you that that's
yeah. I mean, we're 17 years in. We're in a great place. But man, those first few years, I was like, I had to guard my heart about even watching TV. That where there would be that narrative would get fueled of like anything. Like if a woman had an affair or I'm like, oh no, like I would see like the potential for my history or my sin to play a part. And I would have to really be like, God, I don't want any part in that narrative. I want a different narrative. Anyway, all that to say, it plays a huge part, I think. But it doesn't have to be the dominant narrative.
Yeah, and it can be redeemed, right? And the Lord can take what is broken about our family of origin and redeem it and make it something else. But you're right. I hear people who feel like what has happened to them is a curse that is going to perpetuate. If it's what
it's inevitable.
Men who say my dad was married 3 times. So then when they're close to getting a divorce, they're like, this is just what men in my family do. And they think like, so this is the way it's going to go. Or their mom had an affair, and so they don't trust. They're like, I'm convinced that one day this woman is going to reject me that I'm married to because I saw it happen. And while certainly like there can be things like that repeat themselves, it doesn't mean that we are actually stuck in a pattern that we need to look around and expect it. That is definitely what's happening right now. We still need to take a step back and go, what are the facts right now? What is actually true? And is there any reason that I'm telling myself this story? And is there a chance that this story is false?
Yeah. Right.
Because the reason we're talking about this is not just for self-freedom, but like what's fair to your spouse. And what's fair to your spouse is that you would be reasonable about what is actually happening and not just making assumptions on their behalf. And sometimes the best way in a marriage to address that is to lovingly share this is what's happening and to let your spouse speak into that. And I want to talk about that here in a second. But first, Chelsea, help us think a little bit deeper about this again. So a lot of what we're talking about is making assumptions. I assume because Cassie's kind of calling us saying like, I assume because this happened in my past or this happened to my family, now this is going to happen. We're assuming, we're kind of prophesying a curse upon us or prophesying even maybe the opposite, something prideful, something beautiful. We just expect optimistically for these things to happen. I'm telling myself this is the way it's going to go. How does making assumptions about our spouse, how does making assumptions about them and the role they play in the story we tell ourselves, how can that hurt a marriage? How can that hurt a relationship?
Well, a lot of times it creates a situation similar to that dramatic irony you're talking about where, if I'm living as if, my spouse is thinking this or feeling this way and it's not going communicated, then it's almost like the spouse is going to face the consequences of that as if it were true. And the spouse has no idea, right? The spouse has no idea. Like kind of like when people are passive aggression, that is a marriage killer for sure. But like if a wife says in her head, like men never help, they don't want to help. So she says, why don't you just go sit on the couch and I'll make dinner. And then the whole time she makes dinner, she's going, he never helps. He didn't want to help.
She's stewing. Yeah.
Yeah. And she kind of set him up for that, hoping that he would fight for it and say, no, I really want to help. But because he didn't, he took her at her word and thought, that's kind. I'll go sit down, you know?
And now she's bitter.
And now
angry.
she's upset. And then she's going to be cold towards him. And he's going, I have no idea why. Like, you were really kind a minute ago. You encouraged me to just rest on the couch after work, and you were making us dinner. That was so nice. And now it feels like I'm in trouble and I don't know why. Right. So this is one of those things that there are so many ways to lose.
Right.
But yeah, we apply the consequences to our spouse for, sin they didn't know they committed, because a lot of times it was all hypothetical and kind of like when I have a dream that you did something really bad, and, yeah, I'm still very upset.
Tell them about that. Tell Cassie about that. So there's times
I
when,
have been there,
especially early in marriage, where it was really hard to convince Chelsea that her dream was not a real, like, I'm in trouble. And all I did was I slept through the night,
The dream seems real.
Yeah, it's like, but it's not a premonition. It's different than a premonition.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's not a prophecy. But what I'm saying, that's the same kind of feeling is like when you're upset with someone for something that you feel like they did or you think they did, and they don't even know about it.
Like, have you ever had a person that you associate with another person, like they remind you so much in their mannerisms or in the way they look, and so you assume things about this other person based on the first person you knew? So maybe they remind you of an ex-boyfriend who was not a good man, and so you just assume this new guy is not a good guy. Or this girl reminds you of a girl you went to college with who was really annoying to you, and it's like, so I assume this girl, she probably is like that. We do that all the time. We kind of put people in categories that may or may not be fair, and we do it to our spouse based on like patterns of behavior, based on what we want in that moment or how we're feeling, right? Whether I slept well last night or whether I ate what I wanted to eat or how hungry I am can determine how much I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and how quickly I'm able to or willing to assume that you're the worst. You did something to hurt me.
Yeah.
I want to bring this to the scriptures for a minute here. There's a Bible verse I want to read to you. This comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. It says, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ. What does that verse have to do with guarding our thoughts and perceptions in this conversation? What does that mean, to take our thoughts captive? How does that apply? Cassie, help us understand.
Well, even as you were talking about how we build arguments and like collect evidence to feed our false narrative, I'm like, what if we ask God to help us go from like prosecutor to defense attorney on behalf of our spouse? And so like, what if instead of collecting evidence for how they've wronged us or how their mistakes or failures, kind of feed that false narrative, what if instead we seek to defend them and, not based on their merit even, but based on what Christ has done for them and who God has made them to be, and sought to like come to their help, come to their aid, to their defense in our own minds. I'm not saying like literally but if our own minds, when we feel those false narratives creeping up, when we feel ourselves collecting evidence, what if we said, oh wait, I need to change my role. I'm the wrong lawyer in the room. I need to
sitting in the wrong seat.
Sitting in the wrong seat. So that's kind of what came to thought in terms of taking them captive and then asking God to help renew our thoughts, help alter the way our posture is rather than seeking to prosecute and condemn, that we would seek to defend. And again, not because they're perfect or anything like that, but when we believe that Jesus is doing a work in them, like God is who's faithful to fulfill that promise and to do the work that he started in them. And so, man, for God's glory, would we seek to defend them and help them and not condemn them? But then we're taking a place of their own false narrative of shame. If they're walking, I don't know, like it feels like it's all intertwined.
Yeah.
For
Chelsea,
sure.
want to talk about taking thoughts captive, 2 Corinthians. What comes to mind for you in this conversation?
I think it drives home the idea that we don't have to be such a passive agent in everything that comes into our mind. So as the same way if something intrusive were to come into your home, if you had a possum in your house, you wouldn't be like, I guess it's the possum's house. But
so
I think
people
do. I think I'd move out. I'd go to a hotel.
No, keep going. This is so perfect.
But that's an intruder in your home, and you say, this has no right to be here.
Yeah.
This has got to go. Yeah. And you promptly get it out of your house, right? Even if you have to kill it. Sorry to all my animal lovers, but like to me, I'm like, this possum should be dead, right?
Yeah.
It should not be here. We've got to get it out. It doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
And that seems so reasonable with our home. And then with our own mind, there's a way that people entertain anxious thoughts and fearful thoughts and hypothetical thoughts that are not true, instead of saying, take them captive. So does that belong here? Is that an intruder? If it's an intruder, I'm going to bind it up and cast it outside these walls, right? And the scriptures don't even just like leave us on our own with that. There are other instructions about what when you flee from something, what do you run to, right? The Bible talks about fleeing from a lot of things, and it doesn't just say like, okay, so as a Christian, you're just on the run for the rest of your life. You're just running scared your whole life. No, it's saying you run from something that's unrighteous and you run towards Christ.
Yeah.
Good.
Right? The Bible talks about you set your mind on things that are above, not things that are on earth. You think about what's true. You think about what's worthy of praise, right? The Bible says that the Lord keeps him in perfect peace, whose mind is fixed on him, right? And so we have promises we can cling to. We have a lot of hope here. We don't have to just say, well, these thoughts bombard me. These thoughts overwhelm me. These thoughts come into my head. It's okay, think about a possum in your house. You're not just going to be like, well, the possum's just eating pretzels out of the bag now, we
don't make it a space, right? We don't give it a nest. We don't say like, hey, okay, this is going to be part of my life. I think this is such a perfect metaphor, Chelsea. When you're talking about taking a thought captive, it's looking at a thought and go, if this thought does not belong here, or this thought is not true, the story I'm telling myself is undermining my marriage. It's eroding what's true in my marriage. Then I take it captive and say, then I want it to have no part of my life, right? I don't want to give it space to feed it. And how does it get fed? It gets fed by gossip. It gets fed by slander. It gets fed by bitterness. And so how do I starve it? I starve it by feeding it truth, by saying, okay, let's say it like this. If a false story would thrive in the dark, what should we do with a false story?
You bring it to the light, baby.
Bring it to the light. Amen. Chelsea, what does it look like to bring a false narrative to the light?
Yeah, no, I want to share with our listeners, like Adam and I actually practice this in our marriage if we start to feel a certain way. So when I have a day full of stories at work, I have, 13 hours worth of things that happen. And when I come home, it's just my personality to just start sharing them all, even if no one asks. No one has.
I love it about you.
Yeah, no one has to ask what happened or what was the big deal or what was the worst. I just start telling everybody what happened. Sometimes that's less likely for Adam, but he would like to be asked. It would honor him to ask. And sometimes if I don't ask, because I've made that assumption. If you want to tell me, you'll just tell me. So that's an assumption on my end. And then on his end, it's going, hey, the story I'm telling myself right now is that if you really cared about my day, you would have asked. And what that does is it gives me an opportunity in that moment not to feel accused. What I hear from him is, I have a grief. I have a sadness. I have a hurt. And then I can come in and try to put balm on that wound rather than defend myself.
Good.
Does that make sense? And so when I hear it from that perspective, what he's saying is, I'm over here hurting.
Yeah.
Can you speak to it? And it can give me an opportunity to either say, like, you're right, I was selfish and I didn't care. I was focused on me. Or I could say, oh, no. I know you thought that it caused hurt, but really, I really wanted to know. And I was eager to know these things. And here's why I didn't ask or how it happened. But to be able to just clarify what is the reality. Honesty, of course, is key in all these things, but it can be a super helpful thing. And we try to practice that in our marriage. Say, I'm telling myself right now that if you really wanted this good thing for me, you would have made X, Y, or Z a priority, or you would have had this done already. And now I'm just feeling uncared for.
Good.
But we've got to find the words for that,
Will you expound a little bit on that? Because I'm thinking through, so we do something very similar, but it took us a while of practicing that before the other, so that the other one didn't get defensive. Because I think that works in a really safe marriage where you don't dismiss him, Chelsea, because he could say that and you could say, well, that's ridiculous. I care about your day. You should have just started, X, Y, or Z. So I think sometimes our tendency and our pride could be to receive that and get not either dismissive or defensive that the spouse, especially if it's after a long day, and like, why are you making this about you? I'm trying to share about my day or whatever. Yeah. So that was our experience when we first tried to start. This was a couple years ago when this kind of idea of the stories we tell ourselves and me realizing I was living in some false narratives. And so we had to kind of work out, like, how can I share that I'm living in a false narrative without Eric getting offended or think I'm trying to manipulate him to be different or whatever. Yeah. And so will you guys kind of explain, like, how did you get to that place, or what encouragement would you give to someone like us in our early stages?
Well, I've had women share some things with me and they say, well, this is my hurt, or this is what's going on with me and my husband. And then, my question is, did you share that? Did you open up about that? And then they say, well, I would, but he is going to, he's going to be defensive. He's going to dismiss me. He's going to minimize my feelings. And so in a situation like that,
poking the bear, he's going to get upset. It's going to be worse.
Yeah.
And I say, well, have you told him that?
Right.
To say, I have something that's heavy on my heart, but right now I feel scared. I feel scared to tell you because it'll feel extra hurtful if I share it and it gets dismissed. It'll feel extra hurtful if you get kind of defensive about this, because I don't want you to be defensive. I just want to share what's going on in my heart. Do you want some time, or could I share it now? Or, do you think you could listen and just listen and to kind of, share all those things?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it's a little like, to use a golf analogy, Chelsea, it's like
bring it, baby.
Teeing it up. What does teeing it up mean?
It means you put the ball on a peg.
Yeah, you put the ball on a peg because why? Why would you put it on a peg?
Because you need it to be higher up.
Yeah, you're gonna hit better if it's up on the peg, right?
Yeah.
So you tee it up, you set it up. So one of the things you can do in a marriage that is having a harder time around dealing with false narratives is, instead of diving right into the false narrative and just taking a swing at it, you go, let you tee it up for a second. That's good. You start with saying something like, hey, I would like to share something with you. I'm afraid it might come across as an accusation, but I want you to hear me say, I'm actually sharing something with you that I'm having trouble with me. And I'm afraid you might hear it as something I'm saying I'm having trouble with you.
That's good. Yeah.
But what I'm having trouble with me is I keep making these negative assumptions about things you're doing. Now, if you do that passive aggressively, that's not fair. You don't get to say, hey, I'm making these negative assumptions that you don't get me nice enough gifts for Christmas or whatever. But if you can tee it up before you take a swing at it, you say, you kind of set the table and you say, you give them a chance. Like, can I share something with you and hear that it's going to, what I'm going through right now, it involves our marriage, but I don't want you to hear me saying, I have a problem with you and I need you to fix it. I'm saying there's something I'm struggling with and I want you to be able to hear it.
Yeah.
And maybe you could even say, depending on the history of your marriage, you say, I feel like when I've tried to bring these things up before, it doesn't go well. So how could I share something right now in a way that you could receive and help me with? Because the story I'm telling myself is that I don't feel cared for. The truth is, though, that sometimes the stories we tell ourselves have a semblance of truth, right?
Yeah.
So if there's something somebody needs to hear, Cassie, to your point, one of the best ways to make this a safe place is that both of us are not only walking in assuming the best, but we're walking in humility in which, like we said on several episodes, we stand ready to own everything we can.
Yeah.
So if somebody says, hey, I feel like when you don't ask me about my day, it's because you don't really care about my day. And the other spouse might need to say, you know what? I've been so caught up in my own day, it didn't cross my mind to ask. Then that spouse can own that.
Yeah.
And not say, hey, how can I justify myself here?
Yeah.
Or how dare you say that about me? But to actually humbly say, let me receive that. And again, that I think comes better. The longer we've been married, the better we are at it. But it didn't just happen. We didn't just one day start taking swings at this and go, you know what? Yeah, here we go. So if your marriage is in a place where it feels unsafe to say this is what I believe, or what you believe is going on is hard and true, that's a little bit different than what we're talking about, but it also is harder to have these conversations. So if you want to invite your spouse into seeing what you're seeing, I would say the way that you couch it, the way that you set the table, the way that you tee it up, however you want to say it, is going to make a huge impact on how it's received. And if you want to paint a picture of how you're hoping it's received before you give it to them, I think that's going to be helpful.
That's good.
To say, I want you to hear something. I want you to hear this and hear me say this is something I'm wrestling with, I'm struggling with. I could use your counsel and your help on, but it does involve you, but I don't want you to hear it as an accusation. Yeah. And then you say, here's what's on my heart. I feel like you never help with the kids, and that makes me feel like you don't care. Now, if you just jump right into that, what is that? That's starting an argument. That's shots fired, right? That's like saying I'm at you. And then if you want them to help you, if you really want to navigate that and be better, man, taking a shot at somebody is really the first step towards peace, right? That's the first step towards battle. That's the first step towards war. So if you're able to say, I don't want to take a shot at you, I want to invite you into what I'm feeling right now, and in a way I think we can be better towards one another. What do you think, Cassie?
No, I think that's very helpful. And eventually that's where we landed. It was all about how I was communicating, or how, because I'm typically the one in our marriage that I just feel like I'm always the one apologizing. Eric is just further along in a sanctification than me, I guess. But maybe that's a false narrative. But all that to say, I was struggling a couple years ago living in these it was mostly like I do everything around here. We've talked about this. I'm keeping calendar. I feel like the weight I'm bearing is too heavy or whatever, and I would live in these false narratives. And so we were able to work through. But initially, when I was coming to him with like, hey, I'm really struggling, I'm back in that spot where I'm just cycling the lies about how you're contributing or about how we're working together. And it doesn't feel like we're working together. And it just took us a while to get there. I'm just thinking through other couples who might be hearing what the first initial answer and be like, well, that would be great, except when I do that, my spouse might. And so I thought it would help to flesh it out.
No, I think you're exactly right. This is, in fact, it's one of the questions I wanted to talk through, and you're jumping us right to it.
Oh, sorry.
I think it's really important. No, it's great. I think that these false stories, they thrive in the dark, so we want to bring them to the light. But if bringing to the light, they can't be received because it sounds like an accusation instead of saying like I'm dealing with a false story, then how do we back that truck up a little bit and say we need to handle this first? And then at the same time, if there is something true and hurtful, or there's something true about the story we're telling ourselves, we want help sorting that out as well. And that will be best sorted out if we bring that to the light. Mm-hmm. So to truly sort out what's really happening from what's not is rarely going to happen because we kept it to ourselves.
Yeah, totally.
What's going to happen is, or if you gossip about it or nag about it or complain about it or whine about it, rather, it's okay to seek some wise counsel on some things. But if we find out if what's really happening is true or not, it's not going to be by leaving it in the shadows, putting it in the basement. It's going to be by saying, how do I bring this to the light? And I do think it's possible to not be defensive and hear these things, but it does take sometimes some calming spiritual maturity, a deep breath of humility that says, are you ready to receive something that may be hard to hear? Yeah. I think there's also a way, maybe if you're trying to sort out the story, that you take a second, and maybe even before you communicate it, you go on your own and you write it down. Here's what I'm believing is true about my marriage right now. Mm. And then you have somebody else read it, or you read it the next day and say, is that true? Is that what's really happening? Maybe you say it out loud to a friend and say, here's what I'm believing about my marriage right now. Can you help me sort out what's true? What's fair? Is that true about them? Am I ignoring, what Christ would say, am I ignoring a log in my own eye because I'm so bothered by the little speck in theirs?
Yeah.
Is that true of me? If that's true of me, help me see it. Because the truth is, in that analogy, like, am I blind to my own part in what's going on? But I see their part in it very clearly, right? And that's kind of the crux of this issue is I'm making an assumption that they bring sin into our marriage. Well, guess what? So do you. So how do we navigate this together? And I'm not saying everything is like 50-50. We've talked about that before. But it's rare that you have an issue where like one person is 100% the problem. And if we could just get them to believe it, it would solve everything. So saying out loud to a friend or sharing that in a kind way with your spouse. And I would even say, Cassie and Chelsea, I'm sure this impacts you. We do the same thing with our kids, right? We believe narratives about our children. Yeah. If our kid's, ignoring us for an afternoon, or he'd rather be with his friends, or she'd rather be with her friends, we start to tell ourselves a story about how, like, see, I'm just not a great dad. Or we see other families doing things. We go, man, they're more fun than us. Or the false narrative might be, man, look at the way they're giving consequences out to their kids. Gosh, man, I'm so glad we're not them. And we start to judge one way or the other. Yeah. And we build ourselves into a story where we are either the hero or the villain, but it's not fair to build that story without bringing it to the light and say, is that true? Or is that helpful? Sometimes even things that aren't sinful are foolish. And so we're able to bring to the light and say, if this is true of me, but there's a wise way to go about it, help me see the wisdom in it. Yeah. I need to do it because it's righteous, but help me see wisdom. As we close out, any final thoughts, Chelsea, on this conversation?
Yeah, one thing I was going to say is when it comes to these types of conversations where we want to share something and the other one might be defensive or it might seem accusatory, this can be a great place to bring in our community and to say, like, I'm going to share something, and honestly, like, it may make you feel defensive or accused, and I don't want it to, to really preface it with all those thoughtful and tender things you want to say, and then say, would you just think it over, and would you consider, telling your accountability guys and just share with them what I've shared with you, and just, or for the spouse who receives something from their spouse, it's kind of like, here's how you've hurt me, or something you're doing that's kind of hurting the marriage, and your instant thought is, no, I don't do that.
Right. Yeah.
To say to your spouse, okay, can you just let me think on that?
Yeah.
And then go take it to the people that you're close with and say, my husband is saying that I kind of have a tendency to do this. Does that sound like me?
Mm-hmm.
Guys, does that sound like something I would do? Or do y'all see that? And ask for...
And genuinely ask, right?
Yeah, which I think a lot of things, from one of my female friends, I can just take it. I can take it a lot better. I can take it a lot better and then go back to my spouse and say, my friends said you were right. So you probably are.
Or my friend said you're dead wrong, and we're all on team me.
Yeah, but
maybe
the person who got no prep time could maybe use time alone or time with people.
Yeah.
And so to be okay with not settling everything instantly, especially for someone who's been stewing something over, going, I want to share this, I want to bring this to my spouse, and they've been thinking about it, it's heavy on their heart. And then the other one has had no preparation, no awareness. Just to think about how much time you spent thinking about this before you brought it to them. Now can they have some time?
That's good.
And I think that can be really helpful, and to bring your community in.
Amen. Let's take those possums captive. Possum?
Yeah.
Possum?
Get the possums out.
Get the possums out. I hate possums. Super rats, we call them.
Yeah.
They're disgusting. Get them out of here. Every once in a while, our Ring camera will show a possum on our front porch, and I'm just like, man, thank God for doors. At night.
Good. Daytime ones are rabid, so you don't want to see them during the day.
Then I'm definitely going to kill it.
I don't want to see it anytime,
I was going to say the same thing, Chelsea. I think community is like so huge in this. And I think also a reminder that we're playing the long game in marriage. And so I think that sometimes that sense of urgency, especially when it's something you've been stewing on, it might feel maybe more urgent because the narrative is getting louder in your head or whatever. But because we're playing the long game with our marriage, it's okay if your spouse needs a week to think about it, or if you tell them to get time with their community, or you ask them to get time with their community and they can't get with their guys for another week or two. I mean, and that's okay because you're playing the long game. This doesn't have to get resolved.
That's a good
in
encouragement.
24 hours. And I think early in marriage, I remember thinking when one of us fell into sin or when we were having conflict, it had to be resolved right then. And the longer I've been married, I'm like, it's okay if it doesn't. Like, it's okay if we long suffer, forbear with one another. If I'm patient, it will only bear more and more fruit for our marriage. And so that's just an encouragement. I think that kind of comes up with some of our younger couples who we've mentored, and even through premarital, where it's like something just seems so urgent, or like this has to be resolved today or tomorrow. And I'm like, it will benefit if it's like, hey, actually, you can pray and wait. And they can go get some space, and y'all can come back together. So I think that's huge. It reminded me of the false narrative. I don't know if y'all ever saw that Dove commercial. I want to say it was in a different language, maybe French. But it's like a woman sitting at a cafe, and she overhears other women talking to each other who are presumably friends. And they're all saying these awful things to each other. And it's the things that we say to ourselves, typically around body image. So it's like we feel comfortable speaking in the dark or isolation to ourselves, all of these negative things. And so I was thinking about those false narratives that we might think about ourselves, but then we also think about others. And so when we bring it out into the light, then our community can say, whoa, do you really think that? Oftentimes we don't really think that, but it's like, I don't know. It's just these lies, this flesh, this narrative. It just builds and builds and builds.
It's helpful for me as a parent too. I'll see false narratives in my kids. One of the most common ones I think with raising boys is they'll say they're upset because something was unfair, when the truth is, no, they're upset because they lost. If something was unfair and they won, they wouldn't be upset. So it's not fairness that has upset them, but the story they believe is that they have been wronged, when the truth is, no, your feelings are hurt because you wish you had won and it doesn't feel good to lose. Yeah. And finding a gentle way to help them see that, not a confrontational, not a
that's good.
Accusational, but I literally, just so we're clear in this podcast, this is the kind of language that is helpful in sorting out conflict. That I will, if I'm frustrated, think through, what am I believing right now? What is the root of this frustration? Why do I feel wronged, or why do I feel misunderstood, or what is frustrating? And then once I get to the root of like, what am I believing? Being able to literally say out loud to Chelsea, hey, I want you to know what I'm believing right now, or what I'm hearing right now, or what I'm experiencing right now feels like this is true. Mm-hmm. It feels like the story, even we'll say, the story that I'm believing right now, the story that I'm telling myself right now is this. And it's a way of sorting through conflict by communicating the root of my feelings. And teeing it up, prefacing it, qualifying it, those kind of things can be helpful. But I do feel like Chelsea and I now are used to enough of that language that it is a little bit easier to say, okay, that's helpful. You're telling me what you're believing, and I have a chance to maybe even reply and say, would you like me to explain what I think was happening, like the reality that I was trying to communicate, what I was trying to do? Or would you like me to spend some time trying to understand or empathize with where you're coming from? Like, what would be helpful as a response? Because my temptation right now would be to defend myself and say, actually, that's not what happened. But I want to defer to you and say, well, where are you right now? And those kind of adult level conversations versus just, taking a shot back or saying that's not fair, that is not helpful for solving conflicts.
For sure.
Well, I hope this conversation has been helpful for you guys. It's helpful for our marriage to be able to talk through these things. I know, Cassie, you and Eric, 17 years in being married to a counselor, I'm sure you guys have very heady, very beautiful, poetic type conflict resolutions all the time. Rhyming stories, I tell myself. But I do continue to hear that the marriage series has been really helpful for people. So I hope this is one more episode that you would say, hey, this is helpful for the way that I'm thinking about my spouse or thinking about resolving some conflict. And I hope that's the case. Well, thanks for listening, friends. If you think it's as important as we do to disciple our families, please help us out by giving us a great review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can visit one of our sponsors and share this episode with one of your friends. And if you want to keep up with us or join the conversation, you can find us at familydiscipleship.com or follow the Family Discipleship Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. We love you, listeners, and we will be back with a brand new episode next week.